Welcome everyone to part 2 of this Hot Dog Factory satisfying looping animation tutorial series. So this is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, definitely check that out. I'll have a link in the description to the playlist where you can watch the entire tutorial series. And in the tutorial series, we're creating this Hot Dog Factory looping animation. Also, if you'd like to see the 10-minute version of this hot dog animation, I'll have the links in the description. So here is where we left off in part 1. So in part 1, we created the hot dog buns. We also created the hot dogs, and then we also created the robot arm, and we did some animation. And in this part, we're going to be doing a bunch more animation, and we'll also add some more stuff to the scene. If you'd like to help support me and my YouTube channel, then you can purchase the finished tutorial files on my Gumroad store, and you can also get them if you join my Patreon. And also, checking out my Gumroad store and Patreon page are great ways to help support me and this YouTube channel. And you can also check out my YouTube memberships. So if you click on that join button right down there next to the subscribe button, if you join my memberships, that's a great way to help support me each month and also get some cool perks here on YouTube. And then one more thing before we start, I want to give a huge thanks to this video's sponsor, Blender Grid. Blender Grid is an easy-to-use render farm specifically designed for Blender. I've used the service and I highly recommend it. Upload your Blender file or a zip file with the blend file and textures. You can change the render settings on the website before rendering. Blender Grid will let you know the cost before you start the render. You can even choose when you want the render to finish if you're on a tight deadline. While it renders, you can check the rendered frames to make sure everything is rendering properly. Once it finishes, just download the files and compile the frames in a video editor. Use the link in the description to get $20 of render credit on your first render. Alright, so for this part, I'm going to be animating this hot dog, moving around with the hot dog holder here in the background. So if I just select this object right here, this is the main controller object. So this object is controlling the conveyor belt back here. So if I click on it, you can see that we have a keyframe at frame 3 and also a keyframe at 110. So I'm going to move back to frame 3, and then I want to add a keyframe here so that this hot dog is right there at that position. So what I'm going to do is press I to insert a keyframe, and I'm going to click on location, rotation, and scale. So now we've added a keyframe for that hot dog right there. So now we need to move over, and I'm going to move over. If I select this holder right here, this is the main controller object. I'm going to move over to frame 110, and that is when it's moved over. So if I select this object right here, this is the main controller object, and it controls this conveyor belt. So what I want to do is I want this hot dog to be right over here. So I want to move over, and I want it to be right here. And then I'm going to animate this backwards. So as the conveyor belt moves back, this hot dog is going to move back there. So then when we play this, the hot dog will move over, and then the arm is going to grab the hot dog. So I'm first going to just select this object right here, the main controller object, and I'm going to go to frame 110. You can see that keyframe there is at frame 110. So I'm now going to select this hot dog, and what I'm going to do is I want the hot dog to stay exactly where it is to frame 110. So if I select the hot dog, you can see right here we already have this keyframe. So I'm going to select this keyframe, and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and then I'm going to move over and put it at frame 110. And you can see it has that orange line there, and that is telling us that it's not moving at all from these two keyframes. So now at this keyframe, this is where the conveyor belt is going to start to move, and so I need to animate the hot dog. So if I click on this main object, this is the controller object, the conveyor belt moves back to frame 3. So I now want to select this hot dog, and I want to move this over exactly at the same speed so that it moves over. Now in part 1, I moved this over by exactly a value of 3. So your animation might be a little bit different, but you can just take that same value and apply it. So I moved this over by exactly a value of 3. So I can now just select this hot dog. You can see the hot dog has a keyframe here at frame 110, but then this object here, this has a keyframe at 3, and that's when it starts moving. So I'm going to move to frame 3, and then I'm going to select this hot dog. So I can now press G to grab, and I'm going to bring this over on the x-axis, and then I can type in 3 and enter. And then I need to add a keyframe here, so I can press I to insert a keyframe, and I'm going to click on location, rotation, and scale. So now if I move this, because there are keyframes at the exact same values and they move at the exact same value, it's going to move that over at the exact same speed, and so it appears as though the hot dog is moving with the conveyor belt. And if for some reason you don't remember what exact value you used, you could just reanimate this part real quick. But another thing you could do is you could just press Shift D on this object to duplicate it and then bring it over on the y-axis this. And then you would just want to delete all the keyframes so that it doesn't have any of those keyframes. And then you can just move along the timeline and just select this object, and you can see from frame 3 to frame 110, that is how far this moves. So what I can do is I can just go over to frame 110, I can select this object, and I can press G to grab. I can bring it over on the y-axis, and then you can type in 3. You can see 3 is the exact value because that is now right over there. Or for yours, it might have been like 2.5, but you can see that's not my one. My one was moved over by a value of 3. I'm just going to delete this though because I don't need it. So now if I play this, you can see that hot dog moves, and then we already animated the other values. So in part 1, we animated the hot dog being moved up and moved over. So now that's actually looking like a looping animation. So if you just look at this hot dog, it looks like it's the exact same because this hot dog is in the same location as this hot dog right here. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to add some more animation to the claw arm. So as the claw arm moves back, I want to give it some animation right here because it's very rigid. And so what I want to do is I want to make the claw arm kind of swinging a little bit. So as it moves over, it's going to just swing a little bit and it'll just make it look a bit more realistic and organic. So what I'm going to do is just select the main object here, the top object for the claw hand, and I'm going to move over, and you can see from frame 52 to frame 76, it moves over. So I can now just add some keyframes in here to make it look like it's swinging a little bit. So I'm going to go to frame 52, and then I'm going to select this object right here and hold down the shift key and select this object right here. And I want to add keyframes so that they stay right where they are. And also I'll hold down the shift key, and I'm also going to select all these objects just so that they have keyframes right there. So I'm just going to select all these objects and make sure you're on frame 52, and I'm going to press I, and then I'm going to insert location, rotation, and scale. And then let's move back right over here. And now I'm going to move over to frame 85, and I want to move over to frame 85 just so that it can kind of rotate over and then kind of rotate back, so it kind of looks like it'll swing a little bit. So I'm going to move to frame 85, and then I'm going to have all these objects selected. Don't select the top one, but just select all these ones, and I'm going to press I again, and I want to insert location, rotation, and scale. So now these are just going to stay exactly where they are, but now I can add keyframes in between here to make it so it kind of swings a little bit. So the first place I'm going to go to is frame 64, so I'm going to move to frame 64, and I'm now going to rotate the arm over so it looks like it's kind of swinging because it's moving so fast. So I'm first going to select this middle one here. I'm also going to press 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and I can press R to rotate. We're going to rotate that up a little bit, and if I press 7 to go to top view, you can see this is actually moving over this way. Let me just go through this, play through this. You can see it's actually moving back. So I'm going to go back to frame 64. So what I can do is I can just double tap the R key and then move it up a little bit. I can also press 3 to go to side view, and I can rotate it over. Now I want it to automatically add keyframes, so I can just click on this button to turn on the auto keying, and that way when I move it again, it's automatically going to add a keyframe there. So now you can see when I play through this, it kind of moves up and then it kind of moves back. So I want to make that a little bit stronger. So I'm going to rotate that over, maybe rotate it up a little bit, something like that. And then I can click on this object here, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'll press R to rotate, just kind of rotate that up a little bit. So now as it moves, it kind of rotates over, kind of like the claw arm is being pulled by the arm. So the claw is being pulled by the arm, and so it kind of rotates over, and then it'll kind of rotate back. All right, so that's the first one. Now also on frame 64, I want to rotate these over a little bit so they look like they're just kind of being pulled over, kind of like they're hanging on the claw arm. So just like that. All right, so now I'm going to move to frame 75, because at frame 75, that is when the claw arm is stopping. If I click right here, you can actually see it's at frame 76. I'm just going to move to frame 75, and I now want to move this over and move it over here, because basically as the arm slows down, these objects are still going to be moving, so they're kind of going to swing over. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move to frame 75, and then I'm going to rotate these moving back. So I'm going to press R to rotate. We'll rotate that over, and I can also rotate this back a little bit, and then select this one. I'll press R to rotate, and again, because I have the auto key on, it's automatically adding keyframes right there. So I'll rotate that back, and then also I can rotate the little fingers of the claw, and I can kind of rotate that over. So now if I play through this, you can see it starts to move. It kind of moves over, and then it'll kind of swing back. Now I do think it's just a little bit too strong. So on frame 175, I'm just going to move these back a little bit just because I don't want it to be quite that strong. That seems too hard of an effect. That is much better. So just a little swing. So it just kind of looks like the arm is kind of dangling, and so it just kind of rotates. And then also at frame 85, I'm just going to open up the claw hand just a little. So we'll just open that up a little bit, and that way it'll just kind of open up, and then it'll be opened a little bit bigger, and then as it comes down, then it will close around the hot dog. Now let's jump over here and do a different part. So this hot dog, we need to animate this hot dog because you can see that is moving over, but the hot dog doesn't move with it. So we need this hot dog to move over. So again, we need to use the same exact value that we moved it over. Now I know that the value was exactly 3, so I moved this over exactly by 3. So what I'm going to do is select this plate, and this plate has the animation. So you can see from frame 180 to frame 243, the plate moves over. So I'm going to move to frame 180, and then I'm going to select this hot dog. I can now press the I key, and I'm going to insert a location, rotation, and scale, so it adds a keyframe right there. Now I'm going to move over here, and let me just select this plate, and this one has a keyframe at 243, so I can now just select this hot dog. I'm going to press G to grab. I'm going to bring it over on the x-axis, and then again, really important, I'm going to type in 3 and enter, and that is the exact same amount that I moved it over. So now if I move this back, you can see it added a keyframe there because we have the auto key turned on, and so if I play through that, you can see it's moving exactly with the hot dog bun and the plate. Now another thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to duplicate this hot dog and move another hot dog over here so that it'll be a looping animation. What I want to do first before I do that is I want to create the animation with the mustard, and then we'll take the hot dog with the mustard and we'll duplicate it and move it over here, and that way this hot dog will have the mustard. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to duplicate the hot dog and the hot dog stand, and we need a hot dog and a hot dog stand to be right over here. So this is really easy to do. Let me show you how we do this. So I'm first going to select this hot dog and then hold down the shift key, and we're going to select the stand. And also I'm going to turn off the auto key because we don't need that. So I'm now going to move over, and I'm going to move over to frame 3. So that is where the animation starts. So what I need to do now is press Shift D to duplicate, but then I'm going to press Escape so that it keeps its position. And then I don't want this hot dog to be moving, so I want to delete the keyframes. So with these objects both selected, the new duplicated object selected, I'm going to press the A key, and that is going to select everything. And then I can press X to delete, and I want to delete the keyframes. But there is a problem here, and that is that this piece is moving, and that's because this piece is parented. So what I need to do is go back to frame 3, back to where this isn't moving, and I need to press Alt P, and I want to clear the parent and keep the transform. So now if I move this, our duplicated hot dog and our duplicated hot dog stand doesn't move at all. So now I can move all the way over, and if I select this object, actually we need to select this object, you can see this moves over to frame 110 and then it stops. So I can just move over to frame 110, and then I want to select the hot dog, hold down the shift key and select the holder, and then I'm going to lastly hold down the shift key and select this object. And we can now just parent this up, but it's now in the correct spot. So I'm going to now press Control P. We want to parent object keep transform and make sure this object is selected last, and that way these objects will move along with these objects. So now if I move this, you can see that it's working properly. So now if I play this, you can see that these don't have any hot dogs in them. So this moves over, then the hand comes down, it grabs the hot dog, and look at that, we now have another hot dog right here. And so now that is going to match the looping animation. Because this hot dog was in the same exact location as the other hot dog, we can play through this, and when it goes from 250 back to 1, it looks exactly the same because it's at the exact same spot. Alright, so we are now ready to duplicate this arm and then make the mustard bottle, and then we are going to do the animation of the mustard being put on the hot dog. So let's go ahead and do this. So what I'm going to do is select all the pieces of the robot arm. So I'm going to select this piece, hold down the shift key, and I'm going to select all of these other pieces. Just hold down the shift key and select those pieces. So those are all the pieces. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate. Let's click and hold with our mouse wheel and bring it over on the x-axis. And then I want to delete all the keyframes because we don't want any animation yet. We want to do a new animation. So I'm going to press A with my mouse hovered over the timeline, press A to select all the keyframes, and I'll press X to delete, and we want to delete the keyframes. So now if I play through this, this is a now duplicated robot arm, and it's not going to move at all. Alright, so we are now going to hop back to frame 1, and we are going to put this robot arm in the starting position, and then we will also be modeling the mustard bottle. So what I'm going to do is click on the top piece right here, and I'm going to bring this over so it's a bit farther back. And I'll press 7 on the numpad for top view, and I'm just going to bring this over to kind of about here. So I'm now going to rotate it. So I'm going to press 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and I can press R to rotate, and I'm going to rotate this over just like that. Then I can select this object right here. Let's press 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and I'm going to rotate this up. So something like that. Let's press 7 on the numpad for top view, and I need to rotate this over like that. All right, so I'm now going to select this piece right here. This is the wrist. We're going to rotate the wrist. So I'll press R to rotate. Let's rotate this on the y-axis, and I can type in 9, 0, and enter to rotate that over. So now we can model the mustard bottle, and we can stick the mustard bottle right there. Let's go into the camera view to see how that's looking. And I do want to select this, and I'll press G to grab, and we're going to move that down a little bit more so we can see a bit more of that. Let's also rotate this back a little bit. So I'm actually going to press 1 to go to front view. I can rotate this back a little bit, and then rotate this up a little bit. So something like that is better. And then we can move this maybe down a little bit. And it is just a little bit close to the hot dog. So I'm going to move it a little bit back and a little bit over. All right, just like that is pretty good. So we just need enough space so that we can model the mustard bottle, and you'll be able to see the whole mustard bottle. So let's now model the mustard bottle. So I'm gonna press Shift-C to center the 3D cursor, and I'll press Shift-A, and to model the mustard bottle, we are going to start with a cylinder. And then if you click right above me on the add cylinder settings, I'm going to turn the vertices to 12, and then I can just close this. So I can now press G to grab. Let's bring it up on the Z-axis, and I'm going to bring it kind of up here just so that it's out of the way of the other objects. So I'll tab into edit mode, and I'm going to press S to scale, and then I'll scale it on the Z-axis, and let's scale that up. Let's tab back into object mode, and then I want to add a bevel modifier on this to bevel the edges. So let's click on add modifier on the modifier properties, click on add modifier, and let's add a bevel. Let's turn the amount way down. So I'm going to hold down the shift key, make the movements more sensitive, and bring that down. We can also turn up the segments to make that a bit more subdivided. And then using the object context menu, we can shade this smooth. Now it is adding a bevel to a few spots that I don't want. So on the angle limit right here, I'm just going to turn this up a tiny bit to like 31 or maybe like 33, just to ensure it's not adding a bevel up and down. It's just adding a bevel sideways. So I now want to click on add modifier, and I want to add a subdivision surface modifier to smooth it out even more. Let's also turn these segments up to like 5, so it's a little bit more detailed there. And you could also turn the amount down if you need to. So I'm going to tab back into edit mode, and I'm going to click right here to the face select, and I can just select this face. So I'll now press I to inset, and we're going to inset that down quite a bit. So we'll inset that down. Then I can press E to extrude, and we are going to extrude that up. So I now want to make the lid for the bottle. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate. Let's duplicate this face and bring it down. And then I can press S to scale, and we're going to scale that up. Let's also press 1 on the numpad to go to the front view. And I will bring that down on the Z axis a bit more. So I'll now press E to extrude, and we're going to extrude that up just like that. And then again, I want to press I, and that's going to inset that. And I'm going to bring that down just like that. Right, something like that. And then I'm going to press E to extrude again, and let's extrude this up. And then this is going to be the top part of the bottle. So I'll press S to scale. We're going to make it much smaller, something like that. Let's also bring it up a bit more. Sort of like that. All right, so let's scale up maybe just a little bit more. And now I'm going to press I again, so I will inset that face, and I'm going to bring that down. Then I can press E to extrude, and we're going to just bring that down. And I can also scale it up just a little bit, so we'll scale it up in there. You can also go into wireframe, so press Z, hold down the Z button, move your mouse over to go into wireframe, and just kind of see how that's looking. And I can just press S to scale that up a little bit more. All right, that's looking pretty good. All right, let's go back into object mode. And then also what I want to do is I want to make this just a little bit more smooth. So I'm going to click right back over here on the vertex select, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and select that loop of vertices. So I can now press Control B, and Control B is going to add a bevel, and you can scroll your mouse wheel to add more cuts. I don't want to add too many cuts, but I do want to add some to make that a little bit more smooth, and I'll click to place that there. So now that is a bit more smooth. All right, and then let's also press Control R. Control R is going to add a loop cut, and I'm going to drag this out and just push that up to sharpen up that a little bit. And then also if you wanted to, you could turn the bevel amount just a bit smaller if it's a little bit too big. Let's take a look at that. That is looking pretty good. I don't want the bottle to be too long down because I do want to be able to fit it in the camera's perspective. So let's just select the bottle. I'll press G to grab, bring it down, bring it over here. And then I can press S to scale that, and we're going to scale it down. I can also press the period on the numpad to zoom over to it. So I just want to stick it right in there. Let's also press 0 on the numpad to go to the camera view, and I can just see how that's looking. Something like that is pretty good. If you want to, you could scale it up a little bit, or you could make it a little bit longer if you want to. I'm going to bring it down a little bit more because I want the robot to be holding it a little bit more on the top like that. And that is looking pretty good. So I'm going to press 7 on the numpad to go to top view. And I now need to open up the claw arm a little bit just so that it's holding that bottle. So I'll press R to rotate. I'm going to rotate that. I can also bring this out a little bit. And then I can press R to rotate. And we just want to rotate that so that the hand is just gripping the bottle, just like that. All right, that's pretty good. So in order to do the animation, I need the bottle to move when the arm moves. So what I want to do is select the bottle and then hold down the shift key and select the wrist object. I can now press Ctrl P and I want to set parent to object keep transform. And that way when we rotate the wrist, the bottle is going to move with the wrist, but then also the wrist is parented to the arm, so we can move this and it's going to move everything. All right, that is good. So just press Ctrl S again to save, and we are now ready to create the mustard. So we're actually going to make the mustard on the hot dog. So let's just move over here. Let's move down to when this is kind of out of the way, so around frame 100, so that we can see that hot dog. So I'm going to press Shift A, and to create the actual mustard, I'm going to be using a curve, and I'm going to use the Bezier curve. So let's add a Bezier curve. I'll press G to grab. We're going to bring this up on the Z-axis, and here is our curve object. I'm just going to scale this down a little bit, and I'll move it down here. So I need to give it some thickness because right now it actually doesn't have any thickness, so we can't actually see it in the rendered view. So I'm going to click right over here on the object data properties, and then I'm going to go down here and open up the geometry. And under the geometry, we have this bevel. So I'm going to turn the bevel depth up, and that is going to make it more thick. And you can now see we have that nice tube piece there, and that's what we're going to use for the mustard. So if we tab to go into edit mode, we are now in edit mode of the curve. So you can see that the curve has different handles, and we can select the handles, and we can press R to rotate and G to grab and S to scale. We can also select these pieces right here on the handle and kind of rotate the handle around. So we are just going to use this, and we are going to create the squiggly mustard over the hot dog. So let's press S to scale. We're going to scale this down a bit, and I'll just kind of move it over here. And then I can press E, and E is going to extrude this out. So it's going to extrude it and add another handle. And I want to just rotate this down and kind of stick it in here. And I can also scale it down a little bit. And I want to stick that down there, kind of in the mustard. All right, just like that. And I also want to select this handle, and I can also press 7 on the numpad to go to top view. That can make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to just bring this over here, and then I can also bring this over here. So what I want to do is I want to create about 9 squiggles. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm just going to have that go back and forth. That's a good size that I found and a good amount of squiggles. So here's the first one. So it's going to start over here, and then it's going to go across the hot dog, and it's going to go here. So what I can do is I can select this handle, and I can press R to rotate, and I can just rotate that up. And you can also grab this handle, the side of the handle, and rotate it, and that way it can rotate around the hot dog because the hot dog is round. So it comes up more in the center there. So I'm going to press 7 again to go to top view. It's pretty easy to do it in top view, and I'm going to select this handle here. I'll press S to scale and a G to grab, and I'm going to move this over just like that. All right, so now I'm gonna just kind of bring that over to about there, and I'll press E to extrude, and I'm gonna bring that out. And so I first just wanna make those 9 squiggles, and then we'll go back and kind of edit them later. So I'm gonna select this handle. So we have 1, 2, 3. So I'm gonna press E to extrude, that is 4. E to extrude again, that is 5. We're gonna keep on doing that. So 6, 7, and 8. And 9. So if you need to adjust this, kind of adjust where it is, you can totally do that. You can also press S to scale, and you can kind of scale this out to make it a little bit longer. So you can scale those out, and that way it's not going to be quite as sharp. You can see when you scale it down, it gets really sharp, and I do want it to be nice and smooth. So just kind of play around with this, play around with where it's located. I'll scale this out as well. We can scale this up as well. And I do need to rotate this over. All right, so we're just gonna have to hand place this. So what I found works best is to first just get the position right from the top view. So just make it look good from the top view. And then we can move down to the side, and we can change the size of it up and down. Now this end part right here, I want this to kind of look like it's going into the hot dog. So I'm gonna press E to extrude, and then R to rotate, and G to grab, and we are going to stick this right in there. I can also select this handle right here, and I'll bring it in a little bit more. Then I can go to the next one. So let's select this one. I'll press G to grab, bring it down. All right, and then you can see that if I try to rotate this, it kind of rotates this one up, but it also kind of rotates this one down. So what I actually want to do is add one more handle in here, and this handle in the center is going to actually move it up because the hot dog rotates upwards. So to add one in the center here, I just need to subdivide this. So I'm actually going to subdivide all of them at the same time. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to shift select all of the handles right here from the starting to the end. So all these right here. So I'm just going to select all those ones, not the ones at the very end and the starting, but just those ones. And then I'm using the right click select. So to use the object context menu, I hit the W key, but you should just be able to right click and then the object context menu will appear. So using the object context menu, I'm going to click on the subdivide button right here, and that is going to subdivide it. So now there is a curve in between all those curves. So I can now just select each curve and I can press G to grab, and I'm just going to hand place these. So I'll select this one, press G to grab, select that one, bring this one down as well. Let's select this one, press G to grab, R to rotate, and I'm just going to stick those right there. And then I'll also rotate that one down, kind of rotate that up a little bit. All right, that's good. And you can totally look at reference images. I looked at quite a lot of reference images to kind of see how it looked like when I was making the result for this tutorial. So looking at reference images is very helpful as well. So I'm just going to bring that down, select this piece, let's bring that down, and this one as well, we're going to bring that down there. All right, so we're just going to hand place these. So I'm just selecting each handle and I'm pressing G to grab and R to rotate. And also if you need to, you can press S to scale that handle. Bring this one down here. And then that one looks good already. Let's bring this one down a little bit farther, and then I can kind of rotate that up. Oh, let's also bring this one up as well. Okay, let's take a look at this, and that is looking pretty good, although it is coming out a little bit far. So I'm gonna press A to select everything, and I'll press S to scale, and I wanna scale it in just a little bit on the Y-axis. So I'm just gonna bring that in on the Y-axis like that, so that it's not quite going out quite as far. And then if you need to, you can go back here and just kind of adjust some things, because now that I scaled that in a little bit, I just need to adjust some things. So just make it look pretty nice, so that it's kind of sitting there on the hot dog. Let's take a look at that, see how that is looking. All right, and that is good for me, so I'm going to call that good just like that. Now you might be wondering how we are going to animate this. So let me just show you real quick how we're going to animate this. So I'm going to select the object right here, and then I'm going to scroll down. So if you open up the geometry tab, you can go right down here, and then you can see that there is a start and end mapping. So you can see right here, there is an end value, and if I change that end value, it's going to add the curve from the ending to the starting. So we're going to animate the arm coming down, and then we're going to animate the arm going along the squiggle, and that will make it look like it's being added. But then to actually add that, we are going to animate this value right here, and that is how we're going to make it look like it's being added onto the hot dog. So let's first animate the arm before we animate the mustard. So I'm going to go into the camera view, and let's turn on the auto key so that we can start animating this. So I am going to move over to frame 50. So frame 50 is where I'm going to start this moving. So I'm now going to select this object right here. Let's press 0 to go into the camera view, and then I can press I, and we're going to insert a location, rotation, and scale. And actually what I want to do is I want to hold down the shift key, and I want to select all these objects, so just these objects right here. We're not going to be animating the bottle because the bottle will move along with that, and then the robot claw is going to stay attached to the bottle, so we're not going to move that at all. But we're going to be animating these objects. So just select these 4 objects, so the 3 arm objects, and then the wrist. And we're going to press I, and we're going to insert a location, rotation, and scale. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to move over to frame 80. So just move over to frame 80, and at frame 80, the bottle is going to be all ready to start squeezing out the mustard. So I'm going to select this object right here, and I'll press G to grab. Let's bring this over, and then go into the camera view, make sure that is looking good. You don't want to move it too far and show that, you know, the arm isn't attached to something in the factory. So I'm just going to move that over like that. All right, let's also select this and we can rotate it up. So I'm going to press 1 on the numpad to go to the front view, and then I can rotate this up. I can also rotate this up as well, maybe move it down a little bit, and I will bring it over and bring it down, and then we can rotate this up as well. And then also this arm right here, I'm going to rotate this over and bring that out because it needs to be far enough out that the mustard bottle goes right here at the very starting. So you're probably going to need to move the hand out so it's fully stretched out. So I'm going to rotate that out. And then also I want to select this right here and make sure you're on frame 80 when you're doing this. And I want to rotate this over. So we're going to rotate the wrist over. I'm going to rotate it over exactly so that it is straight up and down. So you can press 3 on the numpad. That's going to go to the side view. And I'm going to rotate that right over so it's going right up and down. And then I can rotate this down as well. And then I need to move the whole thing down. Let's go to the camera view and see how that's looking. So I need to rotate this up even more. So we'll rotate that, we'll rotate this over, and we'll rotate that over. And you can also press 1 on the numpad to go to side view and just rotate that over and move it over. to get it exactly at the right point. And also you can press 7 on the numpad to go to top view, and we want to rotate that exactly over so that the very tip of the ketchup bottle is going to be right there where it starts, so it looks like it's adding it on there. Let's also go to top view, and I can rotate this over because for some reason that's rotated over a little bit. So let's rotate that over, and it is really important to get that right there, right where the ketchup starts, or right where the mustard starts. Alright, so there we go. So now if I play the animation from frame 50 to frame 80, it rotates over to the hot dog. And then from frame 80 to frame 85, I want everything to just stay where it is, so I don't want anything to move. So I'm going to hold down the shift key and just select all these 4 objects, so the arm objects and the wrist objects. And then I'm going to press A to deselect everything in the timeline. I'll press B for the box select, and I'm just going to box select that keyframe. And then I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate, and let's bring this over, and we're going to bring it over to frame 85. So now from frame 80 to 85, it'll just stand still just for a moment. So now I'm going to have the robot arm move all the way over to frame 157. So we're just going to move this over. Let's go over to frame 157, so right here. So I'm now going to move all the way over to frame 154. So the arm is going to move from frame 85 to 154. So I'm going to go to frame 154, and I now just want to select this object. I'll press G to grab, and we're going to bring this over on the x-axis. I can also press 7 on the numpad to go to top view, so we can see that a little bit better. And because we have the auto key on, it's automatically adding a keyframe. So I can just press G to grab, and we need to move that all the way over so the mustard bottle is right there at the very tip, so it looks like it's actually going to add that mustard on there. So right about there, right at the very end, just like that, okay? And it is very important that it's exactly right there. So now if I move this, you can see it's moving back and forth. So now what we need to do is animate the mustard, so we're going to have the mustard growing over the hot dog, and then we will animate the arm every 5 frames. So let's go to frame 85, and I'm going to select the mustard. Let's go down here, and we're going to go to the start and end mapping. So what I want to do is turn the end mapping all the way to 0, and then I'm going to hover my mouse over this value and press I to add another keyframe. And then let's just go over here. We're going to go to the end, and if you select this object, it is frame 154, and you can see that the mustard has disappeared. And so what I need to do is just go here to the collections. I can open up this collection and click on the Bezier curve. So we have that object selected, but we can't see it. But you can see right down here, we can just turn this end value all the way up to 1, and then you can see because we have the auto key on, it automatically added a keyframe. And you can also just hover your mouse over this and press I, and that's going to add a value there. So now if I play through this, you can see that that mustard is going along there and being added. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the arm object, and every 5 frames we are going to animate the arm. And we're going to move the mustard so it is exactly right here where the mustard is. So we're going to do that for every 5 frames all the way to frame 154. So we're going to go to frame 85, and then let's hop over to frame 90. Just make sure you have this object selected, and also make sure the auto key is on so it automatically adds keyframes. So what I can do is I can press 7 to go to the top view, and then I'm also going to press Z, hold down the Z button, and move my mouse over to go into wireframe. And you can see that nozzle there. So I'm going to animate this arm, and we're going to move the nozzle right there every 5 frames so it's right over the mustard. So you can see it's right there, and then if you go down, you can see there it is. Now the Z values, the up and down values, we're going to animate that after. We're just going to make it a bit easier and do one value at a time. So first we're going to animate this going back and forth and moving over. So I'm going to hold down the Z button, go into wireframe so that we can see that, and I'm going to move over 5 more frames, and I'll press G to grab, and we're going to move that right there, place it right there. We'll move over 5 more frames, and I'll press G to grab. We'll stick that right there. And generally, because the camera is at this perspective, I do want the mustard bottle to be slightly more towards us so that it looks like it's adding the mustard. So you can see that behind here, you can kind of see that better, but over here, you can't really see the mustard being added. So let's press 7 on the numpad for top view again, and then I'll press the Z button, move my mouse over, and go into wireframe. So I can move over to frame 105, and I'll press G to grab. We're going to stick that there. Let's move over to frame 110. I'll press G to grab, and I'll stick that there. We'll go 5 more frames to 115. I'll press G to grab, stick that there. Then I can move over to 120, and I'll press G to grab and stick that there. Then I can go to frame 125, and I'll press G to grab. We're going to stick that there. We can go to frame 130, press G to grab, put that there. And then we'll go to 135, and I'll press G to grab, and we're going to stick that there. We'll go another 5 frames and press G to grab, put that there. And again, because we have the auto key on, it's automatically adding keyframes. Let's go to frame 145 and I'll press G to grab. We're just going to stick that right there. And then we'll go to frame 150 and I'll press G to grab and we're going to stick that right there. All right, so now if I play through this, it kind of looks like it's being added. We still need to correct for a few things, but it does look like the mustard bottle is now adding that. So there are a few problems. There are 2 problems. One problem is that you can see that sometimes it's higher than the mustard, but then sometimes it's lower than the mustard. So what we're going to do is we're going to press 1 to go to front view, and then I can press G to grab, and we're going to bring this up and down, and we're going to correct for the Z-axis. So we're going to go back and do that for every keyframe. So let's start at frame 185 and I can press G to grab and we're going to bring that up on the Z-axis and I'll just stick that there. Let's now move over to frame 190 and I can press G to grab and we're going to bring this up on the Z-axis and I'll put that there. Let's now go to frame 95 and I can press G to grab and press Z to bring it up on the Z-axis and just bring that up a little bit higher. We can go to frame 100 and I'll just bring it up a little bit. Let's go to frame 105 and you can see that's way too high. So I'm going to press 1 for front view and I can press G to grab and we're going to bring that down on the Z-axis a little bit. All right, let's go to the next one. So 5 more frames. Let's bring this down. So we'll press G to grab, bring it down on the Z-axis. We'll go a little bit farther. I'll press 1 on the numpad to go to the front view. G to grab, we'll bring it down on the Z-axis like that. Go another 5 frames. So we'll just bring that over another 5 frames, bring that down. I also need to bring it forward a little bit. And we'll go another 5 frames, bring that down. Another 5 frames, bring this one down a bit. And then we'll bring that one up a little bit. Not that far up, but just a little bit more. And then we'll go over again and we'll bring that just up a little bit, and then the last one. All right, there we go. So let's go back and play this. That is really starting to look good. Let's play through that. That's looking pretty good. So there are still a few spots where it's not quite on the right spot. You can see right there, it's kind of not on the right spot. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in between each of these frames and I'm going to add more frames just to really sharpen up that animation and get it to how I want. So I'm going to select this object again. I'll hold down the Z button, go over to wireframe and let go to go into wireframe. And then I'm going to press 7 on the numpad for top view. So I'm now going to go in between all of these frames and I'm going to add more frames. So I'm just going to move over, go another 5 frames or so. I'm just going to add some more keyframes, 1 keyframe in between all of these keyframes. And that's just going to ensure that it's in the correct spot. So this is pretty easy to do. You can just move over a little bit, move over to the middle of these keyframes, and then you can press G to grab. And then you can also hold down the shift key if you want to make your movements more sensitive. So we're just going to go in here. There's not an even amount of frames in between here, but just go to one of the frames and just drag it over. And this isn't too hard, so just move over. You can just click and drag right up here where the numbers are and then press G to grab and just stick it right there. And it is pretty easy to do it in the wireframe view so you can kind of see what's there. So that's pretty good. Let's go back out and let's take a look at that and see how that's looking. So now you can see because we've added all those keyframes, it looks very close. It's very, very close. Now there are a few things. If you zoom in here, you can see that there's like a little bit of a cut there. Basically, you're able to see that there's actually a hole in here. So there's a few things that we can do to make that look better. So one thing that we can do is we can go right down here to the Bezier curve, and we are going to open up this bevel right here. Now under the bevel, we're going to click on the fill caps. That is going to fill the caps. So if you can see any spot there where you can kind of see the end of it, it's going to look like it is filled. This is really sharp, and so it might just look a little bit weird. So I'm going to be adding some modifiers to make this look a bit more smooth. So what I'm going to do is go right over here to the modifier properties, and then I'm going to click on add modifier. And I'm going to go down here under generate, and it's the very bottom one, the weld modifier. And so if I zoom in here, let me just zoom in here, you can see what it's doing. Let me just click on the bottle and press H to hide it. And you can see now that we've welded that. If I click right here, I'm going to click right up here. You don't have to follow me on this if you don't want to. I'm just going to turn on the wireframe so you can kind of see what it's doing. It's going to smooth out those sharp edges right there. And you can also play around with the distance. So if you start to turn the distance too much, it's going to start to get rid of more and more vertices. It kind of acts like the decimate modifier. It basically merges the vertices together. I'm just going to leave it at the default though, because if I go back into object mode, let's just go right here and turn off the wireframe, you can see that smooths it out. And so that actually looks quite nice. It smooths it out. If I press Alt H, that's going to unhide that. And really, for a really small part right there, that's going to be very hard to notice. So that looks pretty good just by adding that weld modifier. And then if you wanted to, you could also add a subsurf just to make it a little bit more smooth. So I'll just click on add modifier, and under generate, we're going to add the subdivision surface, and I can just turn the levels in viewport to 1. Oh, I just clicked on the compositing tab. Let's go back here to the layout. So I'm just going to turn the levels in viewport to 1, and that'll just make it a little bit more smooth. It'll make that mustard just a little more smooth. So there we go. It looks like the mustard bottle is actually squeezing the mustard out onto the hot dog. And if you need to, if there are any frames that you need to edit, you can do that. So just go around here, see how that's looking from the camera's perspective. On this frame right here, I do need to edit this a little bit. So I'm just going to select this object, and I'm going to press G to grab, and I'm just going to move this over a little bit just to add another keyframe there, just so it looks a little bit more realistic. So there we go. So you can just go around here and tweak anything if you need to, like for instance right there, that doesn't look the best. So I'll just bring this down a little bit, just kind of go along here and make sure everything is looking fine, because we do want this to look quite nice, especially because the animation is going to be looping many times. So it is worth spending a little bit more time and getting it to look nice. All right, and that is good. So I am going to call that done. All right, let's press Control S again to save. So now what I want to do is I want the arm to stay still at the end for just a few frames. So I'm going to move over to frame 157. So just a few frames forward to frame 157. And I'm just going to press A to deselect all the keyframes. And then right here, I'm just going to actually select this keyframe right here, and I'll press Shift D to duplicate it and move it over. So that way it's not moving. So the arm is just going to stay still for a few frames. All right, so now because this is a looping animation, I want to bring the arm back to the exact same position now that it's done putting the mustard on the hot dog. So what I'm going to do is hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to select all of these 4 objects. So again, the 3 arm objects and then the wrist object. So now what I want to do is just make sure there are keyframes on all these values. So with all these objects selected, I'm going to press I and insert a location, rotation, and scale. That just ensures that there's not going to be anything moving, and that's going to stay where it is. All right, so just make sure these are still selected, so the 4 pieces here. And because this is a looping animation, I want to move it over a little bit farther. I'm actually going to move it to frame 190, and at frame 190, I want the arm to be fully back to its default position. So if I move back to frame 50, you can see here's the default pose of the arm. So what I want to do, make sure all these 4 objects are selected. I want to press B for the box select, and I'm just going to select all of those frames on frame 50. I'm now going to press Shift D to duplicate, and I'm going to bring these all the way over to frame 90. So press G to grab, and we're going to move all those over to frame 90. That way it'll be at the exact same position from the ending to the starting of the animation. So now from frame 157 to frame 190, it's going to rotate back to its default position. So if we play this, you can see just like that, it rotates back up to its default position. All right, so we are now ready to parent the mustard to the hot dog, because if we play this, you can see the hot dog moves, but the mustard isn't moving with it. So this is really easy to do. We're just going to select the mustard, hold down the Shift key, and select the hot dog. And then I'm also going to turn off the auto key because we're not animating at this moment. So I'm now going to press Control P, and we want to set parent to object keep transform. Actually, before we do that, make sure you are at frame 170, or just make sure the hot dog hasn't started to move. So back at 170, frame 170, press Control P, and we want to set parent to object keep transform. That way, the mustard is now parented to the hot dog. And so now when the hot dog moves, the mustard is going to be moved with the hot dog. So you can't actually see it, but the mustard object is moving, but you can't see it up until it actually starts to be put on the hot dog. So then when the conveyor belt moves over, there we go, the hot dog is moving over. So now what we want to do is we want to duplicate the mustard and the hot dog and move it over here so that it'll be a looping animation. So what I'm going to do is just select the mustard, hold down the Shift key, select the hot dog, and then if you remember earlier in this tutorial series, I moved this over exactly by a value of 3. So what I'm going to do is just press Shift D to duplicate, and then press Escape to undo that. I'm now going to press Alt P, and I want to clear the parent but keep the transform. So I'm now going to press G to grab. I'm going to bring this over on the x-axis, and then I can type in 3 and enter. That way it's moved it over exactly by 3. So I now want to parent this hot dog here back to the main object, and the main controller object is this plate right here. You can see all those lines there. Those are the objects being parented to the plate. So with these objects still selected, I'm going to Shift and select the plate, and then I can press Control P, and we're going to set parent to object keep transform. And then one more really important thing, we need to delete all of the keyframes so that the hot dog doesn't move and also the mustard doesn't move. So make sure these objects are still selected, you're going to double tap the A key in the timeline to select all the keyframes, and then I can press X to delete, and I want to delete the keyframes. And also make sure if you select the mustard, you can go right over here and then just scroll down, and right here on the start and end mapping, make sure this start is all the way turned up to 1. So now if I play through this, you can see it's at the exact same location. So if I zoom in here and play this, you can see those lines move there. That is because it is actually a different object moving. But if I click on this button right here, that is going to hide the overlays, and now I can play the animation by pressing the space bar, and I can go to frame 250, and you can see if you zoom in here and look really closely at the hot dog, it appears as though the hot dog is not moving, but that's actually because this hot dog is at the same location as the other hot dog. So of course we still have the materials, we still have the lighting, all the rendering, but you can see that everything is actually looping and it all looks correct. So if you go to the start frame and the end frame, everything looks correct. And just to really show this effect, I'm going to select the camera, and then I'm going to click right over here to the object data properties to see the camera settings. And something that we can do is we can open up the viewport display, and then right down here, you can see that there is this setting right here. And if you drag this setting, that is what changes the darkness around the camera. So I can turn this all the way up to 1, and then that way you're not going to be able to see anything outside of the camera. And that is going to really sell that effect, because you can kind of see that it's not a looping animation because things outside of the camera get moved. And then also you can click on this button right here to hide the overlays. So now if you play through this, you can just look really closely and make sure everything looks exactly the same. And as you can see, if you look all around, it appears as though it's a looping animation because we animated that all properly, and everything at the end frame is also at the start frame, and we've replaced all the hot dogs for other hot dogs. So that is looking really good. So just press Ctrl S again to save, and this is going to wrap it up for part 2. So I hope you've been enjoying this tutorial series, and thank you so much for watching. But we're not done yet. So in part 3, we're going to be doing the lighting. We're going to be doing more lighting and making the lighting look a bit nicer. We're also going to be adding a bunch of materials, and then we're also going to be adding some background elements here just to kind of give some cool things in the background of the factory. And then we will be rendering that out. We'll also be doing just a little bit of compositing, rendering out all the frames, and then in Blender's video editor, we will put all the frames together and make the animation loop. And then we'll also be adding those cool sound effects to really make the animation quite nice. So if you want to go ahead and watch part 3, I'll have it right up there on the end screen and the link in the video description when it's released. And again, if you've been enjoying my tutorials and you'd like to help support me, then some great places to help support me and this YouTube channel is on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. So on my Gumroad store and Patreon page, you can get the tutorial files, like the tutorial files for this one here. You can also get the procedural materials that I create and the 3D models and assets that I sell, and you can also get some exclusive tutorials as well. So checking out my Gumroad store and Patreon page is a great way to help support me and my YouTube channel. But thank you for watching. I hope you've been enjoying this, and I will see you in part 3.